All right. Today on the show, I have Hunter Jensen from Barefoot Solutions on the show. Thanks for coming on the show, Hunter.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. Looking forward to it.
Great to have you. Well, the first thing I wanted to start off with is I always ask this: how did you get started with your agency in the first place?
Yeah. Um, so this story starts in college at the University of Virginia. I dropped out of the computer science program because they weren't teaching the cool stuff. They just like hadn't caught up to the internet. And I just started checking books out of the library on computer programming and web programming specifically. And from there started picking up PHP programming jobs on Craigslist, helped pay for my tuition. And so when I graduated, I knew that this was the space I wanted to be in. I could go anywhere I wanted. So I moved to beautiful San Diego, California, where I've been for the last 20 years. And I was freelancing for a while at first, having a lot of fun in my early 20s. And it dawned on me that you can only bill but so many of your own hours. And that was kind of the day that I decided I was going to get serious about building a business and building my agency. And so from there, I kind of bootstrapped it and got things going.
That's amazing. Um, well, I'd love to learn a little bit more about Barefoot. How would you describe the agency's sweet spot when it comes to like your ideal clients and kind of the sort of work that energizes you and your team?
Yeah. So, you know, at our core, we're a custom software shop. So we like to build complex, data-driven applications across a lot of different, mediums. We started off in web, and we built our first mobile app within like a month of the App Store coming online. Then we did a lot in IoT and medical device apps. Then we got into kind of blockchain and the crypto space for a while when the timing was good. And then we did our first machine learning project, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So we've been in this, quote unquote AI space for quite a while.
Hmm.
And that's where we're seeing the most interest right now. And, our pipeline is full of projects that either are completely engulfed in large language models and generative AI or machine learning and predictive analytics and that kind of thing. Um, and so we're doing a lot of work in that space. I do a lot of speaking and writing and reading to keep up to date on everything that's going on. But yeah, we have a kind of a motto here, which is that we lean into the hard stuff. Projects that might be too complex, it's some like heavily regulated stuff like by the SEC or by the FDA. Those are things we lean into. And so we lean into the hard stuff, and at our core, we're builders. We like to create kind of beautiful, simple, elegant experiences and products for our customers. And our customers, they tend to fall into three buckets. We do some enterprise work. We've worked for Microsoft and Salesforce and Cisco. Uh, we built the IMAX.com website, maybe one of our higher profile properties. We also work with venture funded startups, which is a blast, but pretty unreliable. And so, I'd say our typical customer is, probably a medium sized business. Maybe they're looking to build and launch a new product or modernize their technology, or maybe it's a hardware company, they need apps, that kind of thing. But more recently, with kind of with the release of large language models, it's been really great because it's opened the kind of types of businesses that we can work with now. Specifically, I'm talking about, let's call them, traditional businesses, for lack of a better word, but these are businesses that have been around for a very long time, and they operate fairly, traditionally. Think, escrow companies, or pest control, or any number of companies like that previously were not really interested in building some big piece of custom software, but now implementing some of these new technologies is practical for them, and it's not as expensive as it used to be. And so it's opened up a whole new category of customers for us that previously would have been kind of like, I'm happy to talk to you, but it's unlikely that you're going to want to move forward with our services. There's probably plenty off-the-shelf software that does what you want it to do, in that industry. But that has changed, and and that's only in the last year or two. And it's been really interesting having conversations. Some of these are like family-owned businesses that are on the third generation of leadership and that kind of thing. And it's absolute blast to kind of engage with those types of companies and see how they operate.
Yeah, it's like you're basically taking a lot of like legacy brands and bringing them into the digital and software, basically turning them into tech companies.
Yeah,
In
well, every
some way.
company has to be a tech company now, right?
Yeah.
And and I, in these talks that I have with these CEOs, there's a couple of things that I like to say to them to kind of trigger ideas and let them understand how the tech has changed and what's like what we're capable of now. And the two things I really like to leave them with are, in terms of machine learning, like for your business, what would it be valuable if you could predict it? And I love the light bulbs that go off and the hands that get raised, when they say, oh, well, and, and I caveat that with, and you have data and you have historical data of that thing. And the ideas that spark from something like that are like, it's really just so much fun to see them like apply that kind of thinking to their business.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's one thing. And then the other one that is especially applicable to these traditional businesses, like I'm a developer. I remember when the idea of pulling a single data field out of a scanned PDF was prohibitively complex. Can't do it. It's going to take me hundreds of hours to figure that out. And now it's completely trivial. So easy. And so I ask these business owners, like, that are pushing a lot of paper still,
Hmm.
you're in the mortgage business. It's, where's the title insurance? And we got to move that field into this system. And then we got to print out this document and have it, all that. Like, it's time to re-examine your paper pushing, because large language models have introduced capabilities that we didn't have even, 2.5 years ago, in terms of automating these processes. And they've all got them, right? They all have these where they were like, originally, hey, can we automate this? Well, no, it's actually cheaper to just have a human do it. That has changed. And now's the right time for them to be looking at those things and saying, okay, well, now can we do it? And in a lot of cases, the answer is, yeah, we can drastically cut the amount of work necessary for humans using like the newest, best, and you don't even need the best, using just large language models. Even the cheap ones can get that job done really, really well at this point.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Well, you mentioned, that over the years, you've essentially just kind of been on the bleeding edge of kind of new technology and things like that. But you're also mentioning like a lot of things that large language models are opening nowadays. It seems like you could probably have, plenty of business just, camping out there potentially. Is there a particular reason that you've kind of evolved over time, from like a new business standpoint, or is it um, is it just kind of you just want to kind of always want to be trying the newest, hardest thing? Um, yeah.
Yeah. So the way I see it, like, agencies can stay relevant in one of two ways. You can either specialize, whether it be a vertical or a particular set of software or what have you, and become an expert in that. And you can park it there. And we chose not to do that. We're a generalist firm, right? And so what happens is commoditization.
Right.
Like, you know, you throw a rock and you hit a WordPress developer, and so like if we were still in that space, the amount of competition, not to mention the do-it-yourself tools, would have put us out of business very quickly without a specialization. And so I mentioned those kind of 5 technology kind of milestones that we did a very good job of staying ahead of, and it follows a really interesting cycle. I find that there's often like a single event that turns it on, opens the eyes of the world to
Mm.
what is possible. Like, I think about right now as really similar to like 0809. And what happened then was that the App Store came online, and all of a sudden companies could build apps. And what happened was there was a lot of people kind of looking around the boardroom thinking, saying, well, apparently we need some sort of like a mobile strategy. Does anybody know what that means? And they don't, because it's a brand new thing. And, and when we position ourselves to get ahead of that kind of thing, we're able to, raise our hand and say, hey, we can help you with that. And so there's a bunch of work that we do that is bleeding edge, that's internal, that doesn't make any money, but just to position us for when these things kind of go a little more mainstream. Our clients are not typically on the bleeding edge, they're on the cutting edge, right? Where we've been tinkering and maybe doing some advising and that kind of thing on the newest stuff. And then there's like this inflection point. And then there's a lot of consulting about strategy. What's our mobile strategy? What's our AI strategy? What's our data strategy? Like there's that kind of that phase where people just need to be educated and learn and see what other companies are doing. And they're still a little gun shy. And then like the floodgates open and all the wallets open, and the companies start spending a lot of money on these things. And so we are on the tail end of the consulting phase of AI. Like I'm starting to see big projects in that space open up. And I'm not talking about startups. Of course, they've been doing it for years. I'm talking about medium-sized businesses that are like, okay, what are we going to do? What project are we going to approach? And we've got 6-figure budgets for it. Like, let's go. Let's see if we're done with the like proof of concept type stuff. Let's actually implement something that's going to either drive revenue or lower our costs here.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to that cycle, obviously. And I think I think it's 2025. I think like I said, the budgets are like, if you're a company, doing 20 million plus in revenue and you don't have an AI budget for 2025, you're getting left behind. And so at the end of last year, I don't know that it was quite as clear. I mean, it was to me, but like to executives that are maybe not, all that technical, but this year it is. And so I think we're going to see budgets starting in Q1 25, like really open up. I'm already seeing it. I'm already seeing it.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you've been staying on the cutting edge of things specifically so that you can evolve, just so you're not like kind of stuck doing yesterday's technology while it's being commoditized. You always want to be doing something that's not being commoditized, where you can do consulting and strategy and kind of basically have some experience under your belt while other people are just kind of getting their feet wet. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like we really focus on getting ahead of it. And I know they're going to catch up, right? I've only got a couple of years, 3, before there's a lot of companies that can do what we can do today. And it's been that cycle. It's like 3-4 year cycle from web to mobile, from mobile to IoT and med, from IoT into blockchain, and blockchain into data science. It's just a really similar pattern for each of these major internet oriented digital, transformations based on like the newest tech that's coming out. And so, so that's how we stay relevant. That's how we've grown and been successful. And, on a personal level, I love to tinker.
Yeah.
And that means I get to tinker for my job. I get to try out the new. I was the guy. I don't know if you remember this, but remember Google Glass, the like
Oh
augmented
yeah.
reality.
Yeah.
I was like one of the very early beta users of the Google Glass, and I remember riding my bike around the bay in San Diego with my Google Glass on and my little biker Strava app up there telling me my stats, thinking, and that one didn't actually land. Like augmented reality, like still hasn't quite landed yet. But like I get to do that and it counts as work. and
Yeah.
I'd be doing it even if it wasn't my job, And so like that, I love that bit of it. And I think that's, as the founder, like that's probably part of why that strategy evolved in that way, is because I love it.
Yeah. From a positioning standpoint, have you like depended on your network to keep the new business flowing, or have you formally like repositioned your agency at each of these sort of pivotal shifts in technology in the market?
Yeah. We fundamentally, I wouldn't call it a full rebrand, but we definitely shift our brand each time.
Okay.
Every 3 or 4 years, you need a new website anyway, or you need like you need a
Dramatic overhaul or something?
dramatic overhaul because it starts to look stale, right? And it's a classic, like, the shoemaker's son's shoes are like the last to get repaired. It's very easy to let your own website go stale because you're busy building software for other people. But normally this shift is like the catalyst for us to upgrade our brand and shift focus a little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, like we still do tons of web development work and mobile app development work and all the rest of it, but like forward facing, we really do shift the brand a bit to focus on this stuff. We shift our content strategy. Everything that's coming out from Barefoot right now is all about large language models and AI and all the rest of it. And so we fundamentally shift, which is not always the easiest thing. And it's sometimes tricky to time it perfectly. You might come a little early to the party, and then you've got this agency branded as doing something that nobody wants. But normally we'll wait to get a few really meaningful, flag in the ground portfolio projects to like hang our hat on. And
Hmm.
once we have that, that's often the time. Like I like to have three for whatever reason. When I've got three
Yeah.
good case studies in this new area that we're going to explore, that's when we upgrade our presence everywhere to kind of reflect that. Because then, it's one thing to say you do this stuff. Like every web development shop in the world has like machine learning on their uh, list of services, and they've had that for years,
Hmm.
because they use some of those tools, and that's fine. But it's like an aside, it's like an afterthought, and it's not specialists in that. It's often just engineers that are like, well, I know how to use this neural network model that AWS offers for free, so now I'm like a machine learning expert. There's a difference between listing it as a service and being positioned as an expert in that particular thing. And
Right.
that's what we try to do.
Well, and that's where the case studies, I'm sure, come in handy because it's not only you saying that you do this new thing, but it's you have some uh, tangible credibility that you can point to as like, here are some actual projects we've completed that demonstrate this new shift or this new direction that we're taking.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, is this just talk, or like, show me the money kind of a thing, right? Like what have you done that worked?
Hmm.
And until you can do that, and so like those first projects are often the hardest to get. And normally I am very deeply personally involved in those first projects in order to both close them and make sure they execute successfully. But then once you got a few under your belt, your team, you can rely on your team to both close deals and execute and implement the solutions, and then you're off to the races.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I think that's a good place to kind of get into how you think about growth as an agency. I know some agencies, you mentioned kind of specialist agencies versus generalist agencies. Some people will pick one vertical and camp out there. You've chosen more to kind of take this slightly different approach, but um, aside from kind of being on the cutting edge of things, how do you think practically about like, you know, keeping your pipeline full?
Yeah, the forever challenge. Once you find something that starts working, everybody else figures it out, and you maybe got a year or two with that tactic, and then you got to switch gears. But yeah, I mean, outside of positioning, which helps a lot, you really do have to put in the work to keep your pipeline full. And we do, I just this morning was writing my 2025 kind of plan with my team to see what that looks like. And back in like 2021, even 22, we were seeing tremendous success with just outbound, just cold emailing, LinkedIn automations, things like that. And it just stopped working. Like
Mm.
not all of a sudden, but gradually it just, and we turned all the knobs and dials and, tried all the new different things. And we just could never quite get it to work like it used to. And my theory is that there was a whole chunk of marketers that focused on in-person things. They did conferences and events and went to networking things and all of that. And all of it shifted to like LinkedIn and
Yeah.
email and paid advertising, because that's all we had, right?
Yeah. You
Events
couldn't go to a conference, so you had to do
weren't any
something virtual.
conferences. It was,
Yep.
and so it like flooded. It just saturated everything, and it's like really, really hard to get above the noise. And so what we've been thinking about, one is like actually really getting ahead of the return to in person, right? These are happening again. But some people have shifted and are like not planning on going back for one reason or another. I've been doing speaking engagements in person with CEO groups that I mentioned earlier that have been just tremendously successful in terms of lead generation. Every single event is several leads at minimum. And I don't think I've done an event that hasn't turned into a paying client yet. And so that's been a really great strategy. And again, that speaks to staying ahead. Nobody would be interested in hearing me talk about web development. That ship sailed. But I'm talking about the new stuff, which is
Yeah.
interesting to people, and they need to learn about it. And so I can get rooms full of CEOs because the topic is interesting, right? And so that's one area where we've already seen success in 24, and we're going to double down on it in 25. And then, another focus for this coming year is actually really leveraging generative AI in our outbound efforts, both in content creation, outbound messaging, heavy personalization, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we've seen some pretty decent success with that already, and we're actually doing some of that for our clients too right now because it's been successful.
Yeah.
You know, we did this for a marketing agency that was trying to attract plaintiff class action attorneys. Very specific thing. And he said he was having a hard time finding them and getting in touch with them. Every law firm says they do class action, but almost all of them, that means they defend against class action lawsuits, right? They get the big companies to pay. Not that many are plaintiffs attorneys. So anyway, we went out, we found a database of every class action lawsuit filed for the last 20 years. Wouldn't you know it, the emails and phone numbers and everything of the plaintiff's attorneys are right there on those documents, but they're 100-page documents. And so 3 years ago, you'd have to have like an intern download it and look through it and pull stuff out and try and craft an email that talks about the case and all that. But now, per my point earlier, you can automate the whole thing. And so we're able to grab the document, put it in a vector database, and do RAG retrieval on it and write a really personalized email. And we can do it at scale to the point where the client asked us to turn it off after 1 week because they had more business than they could handle and they needed to hire. Looked at it again. So point there, that's just one example of like really leaning in to the new generative AI stuff and getting ahead of the trends that people will catch up to eventually. It's the same thread kind of on the lead gen side as it is on our overall company strategy. It was like, let's just be ahead with, we've got an army of engineers here. And, this is something I didn't mention earlier, but I actually sold the controlling interest in Barefoot back in 2019. And so we have an interesting model in that we're a boutique agency, but my parent company's got 1,500 employees, mostly engineers. And so I've got, engineers, any tech stack, any expertise, anything that I could possibly want, I have access to, and very quickly. So that allows us to experiment, when they have some downtime, write some scripts and try some things that are far too technical for most marketers to actually be able to execute on. And that way we try to stay ahead, because I certainly don't want lead generation to fall on my back forever. The speaking strategy is working right now because of where we are in the cycle, but in another year or two, people are going to be less interested. And then any agency like mine, referrals are always really important. We have 20 years of happy clients, and they, if you remind them you're there every now and again, they'll say, oh, you know what? You should talk to so-and-so. And so that's always been a significant part of our new business. And I don't expect that to change. Like that's, when you go out and hire, you've got $250,000 budget for a custom software project. Are you going to just Google somebody and call them and see if they're interested? No, you're not. You're just not. You're going to reach out to your network, and you're going to find somebody that has experience with a particular agency or has a recommendation, and they're going to walk you in. And so when you get to a certain like size, like paid media is useless. Even the outbound, like cold outbound, is not very effective. And so one of the things we like to do with the cold outbound is actually like have like a real small offering. Like, hey, we'll, 5 hours of consulting to help you develop an AI strategy for free or for $100 or whatever. And then you get your foot in the door, you build your relationship, and then you get the big project. But like the idea that we're going to be selling huge projects for people we've met from strangers is just like not all that realistic, I don't think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I tell people, trying to use paid ads to get like, 5-figure deals is like asking for a marriage proposal on the first date. You're just like, people are like, hey, we just met. I don't, we're not there yet, sort of thing. We gotta take our time with this. And so, I mean, to your point, having that sort of much more, that less expensive offer as kind of like, hey, you know what? Like, let's go on a date and see how things go, and you can see if we earn a second date, and kind of build things from there.
So one of the giving away a secret here, but one of the things we're working on also to that end, to that specific point, is we started a newsletter this year. And we've been building our user base. It's been getting great feedback. I put myself and my partner kind of switch off back and forth writing it, but we put a lot of energy into it. And I got this trick from, from somebody else that runs a marketing agency. And the small offering is maybe a mention in the newsletter for cheap. Would you be interested in an audience like this? So you can get the word out, and we'll look at your product and we'll give it our thoughts or something like that. That's a nice, easy thing to say. Maybe tell me a little bit more. And then you get the chance to introduce yourself, and you can talk about what you're capable of, and they get familiar with your company and things like that. So really thinking about like small offerings is how I think about the cold outreach, because to your point, like nobody's getting married on that first date.
Yeah. I talked with another dev agency who, it was interesting. Their kind of their leverage, I don't know what the right phrase is, but their kind of way in was they would offer to do maintenance work, which is like, it's residual. It's not very exciting a lot of times. It's like, just make sure our plugins are up to date, that sort of thing. But they end up they get a little bit of revenue. They start building a relationship, and then over a certain time, over a certain amount of time, it's like, oh, well, maybe we should update this thing that's a little bit more expensive, and maybe we should, and so upfront, they're maybe not closing a big project. They're just closing like kind of a small retainer. But when the time comes, they're the natural first choice for the bigger project, because they've been working with this agency already for all this smaller stuff, which I thought that was kind of an interesting approach.
That is an interesting approach. That's like the work that nobody really wants to do, but like somebody's got to do it. And often the people that did your big project, you don't necessarily want to pay them for the maintenance, because you can probably get it a little bit of a better deal elsewhere sometimes. And so I could see how you could kind of swoop in and say, oh, we love doing that. We've got all the infrastructure. We won't miss a single plugin update. And, we've built out our processes and our systems. And so we can do it for much more cost effectively than, this big agency that did the original build or what have you. So I like that. I could see.
Yeah. I just thought it was an interesting approach. I hadn't heard of that before, but I was like, that sounds, kind of obvious when you think about it, but it's like, except I guess it's not obvious, because a lot of people I've talked with haven't thought about it, but
not.
Well, this has been super helpful. Yeah, I mean, for people who want to get to know you better, learn more about Barefoot, what's the best way for them to connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously check out the website. I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you want to, actually send me a message, if it's not a cold sales message, then there's a very high likelihood that you'll hear back from me. And, if you have anything you want to talk about, I'm actually, despite being quite busy, I'm also very willing to take meetings that might not go anywhere, just because I enjoy them and I love learning about new businesses and things like that. So I encourage your listeners to reach out if they have something that they think might be interesting for us to talk about.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks so much, David. This was a pleasure.